The doctor stared at me with those cold, clinical eyes, offering not a trace of compassion. "You will never walk again," he said, his voice as flat as if he were commenting on the weather. In that instant, my entire world fractured. The ceiling tiles above me seemed to spin and blur. I could hear the rhythmic beep of a machine somewhere to my left, a sterile counterpoint to the chaos erupting in my mind. Yet, even as the pieces of my life fell around me, a tiny, stubborn whisper inside me, a flicker of a flame that no one, not even this man in his white coat, could extinguish, murmured, "You're wrong." "Good morning. My name is Margaret, and I am 78 years old. It's been many, many years since that day in the hospital, yet the memory remains so vivid that I sometimes wake in the dead of night, the echo of those 5 words ringing in my ears. It is a terrible thing, isn't it, when someone tries to write the final sentence of your life story for you? My own story, the one I chose to write, begins long before that hospital room. It begins in Chicago, in the early 1970s. The city was electric then, a whirlwind of change. The turbulent 60s had passed, leaving behind a restless energy. New high-rises were scraping the sky, the streets were full of big, gleaming cars, and there was a sense of possibility in the air that felt infinite. I was young, in my early 20s, and full of my own dreams. I had just graduated from Northwestern University and had landed my dream job as a high school literature teacher. I loved it. I loved the smell of old books and chalk dust. I loved sharing my passion for the great authors with my students, watching their eyes light up when they finally understood the beauty of a poem or the depth of a novel. I felt independent. I felt alive. It was during a university fundraising gala, one I had been encouraged to attend as a new alumna, that I met Robert. He was, I must admit, the most fascinating man I had ever seen. He was older than me, perhaps by 10 years, and moved with an air of absolute confidence. He wasn't just in the room, he owned it. He had a smile that seemed to illuminate everything around him, and he fixed that smile on me. He introduced himself as an entrepreneur, a self-made man who owned a rapidly expanding logistics and manufacturing empire. He was elegant, well-spoken, and he listened to me. In an era when many men still expected women to be quiet accessories, Robert seemed fascinated by my mind. "You're different from the other women here," he told me during our first official date, at a small, impossibly expensive cafe in Lincoln Park. "They talk about shopping and parties. You talk about poetry. You have a fire in you, Margaret. It's rare." I was quite simply swept off my feet. I had been raised by simple, hard-working parents in the suburbs. I was smart, yes, but I was also naive. I had never encountered a man like Robert. The courtship was a whirlwind. He sent flowers to the school, not just a bouquet, but extravagant arrangements that left my colleagues speechless. He found first-edition copies of books I had only mentioned in passing. He took me to restaurants where I couldn't even pronounce the items on the menu. My friends were envious. "You've caught the big one, Marge," my best friend Diane told me, half joking. "He's a prince." My colleagues whispered about how lucky I was, and I believed them. I truly did. After only 6 months, he proposed. He had taken me to dinner at a revolving restaurant atop the Hancock Tower, the entire glittering skyline of Chicago spread out below us like a carpet of diamonds. The ring was stunning, a diamond so large it looked almost fake. It was probably worth more than my father had earned in the last 10 years. I didn't question it. I said yes, my voice trembling with a joy so profound it almost frightened me. The wedding was a spectacle. It was held at one of the city's most exclusive country clubs with hundreds of guests. I knew almost none of them. They were his business associates, politicians, judges, people whose names I recognized from the newspaper. They all seemed to respect Robert, though looking back, I wonder if the emotion I mistook for respect was actually fear. My parents looked utterly overwhelmed. My father, a carpenter his whole life, seemed uncomfortable in his rented tuxedo. "You've done so well, honey," my mother whispered to me, her eyes wet with tears. "He's such a respectable man. He'll give you a wonderful life." And so, my new life began. It was only after the wedding, after the honeymoon in Europe, that things started to change. The change was so subtle at first, like the tide slowly pulling out, that I almost didn't notice I was being stranded. Robert bought us a magnificent apartment in a brand new high-rise overlooking Lake Michigan. The views were breathtaking. "Our home must reflect my status," he said, as he hired expensive decorators. That beautiful home, with its floor-to-ceiling windows, soon became my prison. The first comments about my job began. "Is it really necessary for you to keep teaching, darling?" he asked one evening, swirling brandy in a crystal snifter. "A woman married to a man in my position doesn't need to work, you know." I resisted, of course. I explained how much I loved my job, how important it was to me. He seemed to accept it, but with a sigh of reluctance, as if my desire to work was a childish whim he had to indulge. Then, he started on my friends. "That friend of yours, Diane," he said after she had come over for coffee. "She seems envious of you, the way she talks. I don't think she's a good influence. You should probably see less of her." He began to orchestrate my life to ensure it. I would make plans with Diane, and Robert would suddenly announce a critical business dinner that same night, one that I absolutely must attend as his wife. "You know I can't close these deals without you by my side, Margaret," he'd say, stroking my cheek. It wasn't a request. I had to cancel. Diane was understanding the first time and the second, but after it happened 5 or 6 times, her calls became less frequent. He would also create delays, keeping me on the phone or needing help with something just as I was about to leave, making me late for everything until, eventually, people just stopped inviting me. With my parents, his tactics were even more insidious. He never forbade me from seeing them. Instead, he made every visit an ordeal. We drove to their small suburban home for Sunday dinner. My father, proud of his trade, was showing Robert a birdhouse he had built. Robert smiled, but on the car ride home, he shook his head. "Your father is a good man, a simple man. But he has no grasp of the real world, does he? It's almost sad." After another visit, it was, "And your mother, bless her heart, she's just so old-fashioned in her thinking." He filled every visit with such tension, such veiled criticism of their simple, honest lives, that I began to limit contact. I told myself it was to spare them his judgment, to avoid the conflict. But the truth is, I was being isolated, one relationship at a time. Within a year of our wedding, my world had shrunk. My friendships had withered to occasional awkward phone calls. I saw my parents once a month in brief, formal meetings. My entire social life revolved around Robert, his associates, and their wives, women with whom I had absolutely nothing in common, who spoke only of their staff and their vacations. It was then that he made his final move on my job. "You're always so tired," he said one evening, rubbing my shoulders. "This teaching, it drains you, and besides, I need you with me. I have so many events, and I need my intelligent, beautiful wife to host. It's important for my business." By now, I was utterly alone. I had no allies, no one to confide in, and Robert could be so persuasive. He knew my weaknesses. "Think of all the time you'll have," he cooed. "You could finally read all those books you're so passionate about. You could even write that novel you've always talked about." He used my own dreams as a weapon against my last piece of independence. After months of constant, gentle pressure, I finally gave in. I told myself it was just a temporary leave of absence, that I could always go back. I didn't know I was closing the last door to the outside world. With my job gone, my life became a vacuum, and Robert rushed to fill every inch of it. He began to control every aspect of my existence. He commented on what I wore. "That dress is too plain, Margaret. You represent me." Or, "That's too flashy." Are you trying to look cheap? He criticized the food I cooked, the way I arranged the furniture. Even the books I read became subject to his scrutiny. Why are you reading this depressing trash? He'd ask, picking up a novel from my nightstand. You should read something lighter, more suitable for a lady. The criticism extended to me. The way I spoke, the way I walked, the way I sat at his endless dinner parties. Nothing was ever good enough. A woman in your position must have more poise, he'd lecture me. I found myself changing, morphing, trying desperately to become the perfect, flawless woman he demanded, and in the process, I was losing myself. I didn't recognize the person I saw in the mirror anymore. The next step was financial control. I had my own savings from my teaching years and a small inheritance left to me by my grandmother. Robert convinced me to merge everything into a single, joint bank account. It's so much simpler this way, darling, he said. I'll manage all the finances. You won't have to worry your pretty head about a thing. And just like that, I was completely dependent. To buy anything, a book, a new dress, one he would approve of, even a birthday gift for my mother, I had to ask him for money. He never said no, not at first, but he would always ask, what for, and how much, making me justify every single penny until I simply stopped asking unless it was absolutely necessary. The first time he raised his hand to me, it was almost 2 years after our wedding. We were hosting one of his dinner parties filled with his influential friends. He was telling a story, quoting a piece of literature I had once taught. He got the details completely wrong, attributing a famous line to the wrong character. Thinking I was being helpful, I gently, playfully corrected him. Oh, darling, I laughed. Wasn't it the other character who said that? The table went silent. His eyes, which had been so warm and charming, turned to ice. He smiled, a tight, thin smile, and said, You must be mistaken, my dear. The conversation moved on, but I felt a chill I couldn't shake. That night, after the last guest had left, he exploded. You humiliated me, he yelled, his voice a low growl I'd never heard before. You made me look like a fool in front of those men. Robert, I didn't mean... His hand moved so fast I didn't even see it coming. The slap was sharp, stinging. It sent me staggering back, more from shock than the pain itself. I had never been struck in my life. And then, just as quickly, the transformation. He was on his knees, pulling me into his arms, his body shaking with sobs. Oh God, Margaret, I'm so sorry. I'm under so much stress. This deal, I'm not myself. It will never, ever happen again, I swear it. And I, the woman who had been so isolated, so starved for affection, so desperate to believe the dream wasn't a nightmare, I believed him. But it wasn't the last time. It became a pattern. The tension would build in him, and he would erupt over the smallest imagined slight. Dinner being 5 minutes late, a comment I made that he found disrespectful. The violence became more frequent, more severe. And always it was followed by the tears, the apologies, the lavish gifts, and the promises. I became an expert at hiding the bruises. I learned to anticipate his moods, to be invisible, to make myself as small as possible. I thought of leaving, but the shame was overwhelming. How could I admit this failure to my parents? And besides, where would I go? I had no job, no money of my own. He had isolated me so completely. I was a ghost, haunting the beautiful apartment that had become my cage. About 3 years into this nightmare, his behavior changed again. There were more late-night calls, taken in his study with the door locked. Sudden, unexplained meetings that lasted until 3 a.m. He became more secretive with his papers. At first, I assumed it was work stress, the catalyst for his rages. Then, I began to suspect another woman. I shouldn't have looked. I know that. But one day, while cleaning his suit jacket, I found a receipt. It wasn't for a business dinner. It was from a local hotel, one of those no-tell motels by the highway, but the charge was astronomical. My blood ran cold. He went on a business trip to Detroit. I knew this was my chance. The terror of what he might do if he found out was almost paralyzing, but the need to know the truth was stronger. I went into his study, the room that was his private kingdom. I searched his desk. I found documents I didn't understand, offshore accounts, transfers of huge sums of money, names of shipping companies I'd never heard of. And then, in a false bottom in his desk drawer, I found the ledgers. It wasn't just money, it was cargo, shipments. Something about logistics that didn't sound like simple manufacturing. It sounded criminal. And then, tucked beneath the ledgers, I found the photo. It was him with his secretary, a woman I had seen many times. They weren't in an intimate embrace, but the way they were looking at each other, the way his hand rested on the small of her back, I knew. The betrayal was so complete it almost made me laugh. I don't know what gave me the courage or the stupidity to confront him when he returned. Maybe it was the last spark of the old Margaret, the teacher who believed in truth. I laid the photo on his desk. I laid the ledgers next to it. "I want an explanation, Robert," I said, my voice shaking. "For her, and for this." His reaction was immediate and terrifying. It wasn't the hot rage I was used to. It was something cold and final. He didn't yell. He simply looked at me, and then he struck me. It wasn't a slap. It was a punch, a calculated act of violence. I fell backward, my head smashing against the sharp marble corner of the fireplace. I remember his face, distorted as he stood over me. He wasn't crying this time. He was just angry. "You are nothing without me," he screamed, his voice cracking. "Nothing. Who would want you now? You ruined everything." I must have lost consciousness. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a hospital room. The light was blinding. Robert was by my side, his face a perfect mask of the worried, grieving husband. "She fell down the stairs," I heard him telling the doctor, his voice thick with fake emotion. "She was cleaning, lost her balance. She's always been so clumsy." The doctor, a man with cold, clinical eyes, nodded. I found out later he was an old friend of Robert's, a man who owed him favors. It was in that bed, a few hours later, that I realized I couldn't feel my legs. I tried to move them, to sit up. Nothing. Panic, cold and sharp, seized my throat. I called for the nurse. The next day, that same doctor came into my room. Robert was right beside him, holding my hand in a grip that felt less like comfort and more like a warning. The doctor looked at my chart, then at me, and he said the words that were supposed to be my life sentence. "You will never walk again." Robert made a sound like a sob, burying his face in his hands. But I had been married to him long enough. I saw, just for a second, the look in his eyes before he hid them. It wasn't grief. It was relief. It was satisfaction. A paralyzed wife was so much easier to control. A paralyzed wife couldn't run. "I'll take care of her," he announced to the doctor, his voice booming with false nobility. "She's my wife. It's my responsibility." When the doctor left, Robert's mask dropped. He leaned in close to my bed, his voice a venomous whisper. "See what happens when you defy me, Margaret? See what happens when you don't know your place? Now you're not going anywhere. Now you will truly be mine. Forever." His words were meant to be the final nail in my coffin. They were meant to break me, to extinguish that last flicker of a flame. But he had made a terrible miscalculation. As I lay there, trapped in a body that wouldn't obey me, I felt that flicker roar into a fire. A cold, quiet, unquenchable resolve. This was not the end. This would not be my story. He had told me I would never walk, but I knew in that moment, as I stared back at the monster I had married, that somehow, someday, I would find a way to fly. I held on to that single defiant thought as Robert began making the arrangements for my transfer. "It's the best rehabilitation clinic in the country," he told my weeping parents who had rushed to the hospital. "In the mountains. Quiet, remote." I knew what that meant. It wasn't the best. It was the most isolated, another prison, just with different bars, a place where my screams would never be heard. As the ambulance drove me away from Chicago, away from everything I had ever known, I watched the skyline fade. I didn't know what awaited me in that clinic, in those remote mountains. I only knew that I had to survive. Because it was in that clinic, the place that was meant to be my tomb, that I would find the key to my rebirth. The ambulance ride lasted for hours. The city of Chicago, my entire world, vanished behind us, and we were swallowed by the highway. I drifted in and out of a painful, hazy consciousness. When the smooth highway finally gave way to winding, bumpy roads, I was jolted awake. I looked out the small, grimy window in the back. Trees, nothing but trees, pressing in on the road, their branches scratching at the sky. We were climbing, moving higher and higher into remote mountains that seemed to drain the sunlight from the air. Finally, we stopped. The back doors opened, and the cold, crisp air hit me, smelling of pine and damp earth. I was pulled out, strapped to the gurney, and all I could see was the building. The sign said, "Serene Pines Rehabilitation Center." But there was nothing serene about it. It was a large, imposing building made of dark stone, looking more like an old, grim university than a place of healing. A high iron fence surrounded the entire property. It wasn't to keep people out. It was to keep people in. I was wheeled inside. The staff was efficient, cold. They didn't speak to me, only about me. Female, mid-30s, spinal trauma, paraplegic, put her in room 204, B wing. My room was small, clean, and utterly lifeless. It had a bed, a small dresser, and one large window that was sealed shut. It looked out over a dense, dark forest. Robert, of course, had paid for a private room. I was alone, completely. The first few weeks were a blur of chemical fog. My treatment began immediately. A nurse, a stern-faced woman named Nurse Gable, came in every few hours with a small paper cup of pills. "For the pain," she'd say, "for the nerves, to help you rest." But the pills didn't just manage the pain. They smothered me. They filled my head with cotton, slowing my thoughts, dulling that flicker of resolve I had felt in the hospital. I would try to think, to plan, to hold on to that anger, but it was like trying to catch smoke with my hands. The world became soft, blurry, and distant. My days fell into a meaningless rhythm, a morning treatment of pills, an orderly who would move my legs for me, a process they called physical therapy, but which felt more like handling a mannequin. "Just to keep the circulation going," the therapist would say, his voice bored. "We don't want any complications." The implication was clear. This wasn't about recovery. It was about management. I was a problem to be managed. Doctor Miller, the man in charge, visited me once. He was the director of the clinic, a man with the same cold, clinical eyes as the doctor in Chicago. He reviewed my chart, which Robert had conveniently forwarded. He didn't even examine me. He just patted my arm. "The most important thing now, Margaret," he said, his voice slick and smooth, "is acceptance. Your husband has been very generous. He wants you to be comfortable, so we will focus on your comfort. There's no sense in chasing false hope." False hope. That's what they called my desire to live. The drugs were so strong. They were designed to make me accept, to make me comfortable, to make me compliant. In the drugged haze, my mind kept drifting back, not to the good times, but to the moments of control. It was as if my brain was trying to show me how I had ended up here. I remembered one morning, about a year before the Incident. I was in the kitchen of our Chicago apartment, the sun streaming in over Lake Michigan. The phone rang. I answered, and my heart leaped. It was Linda, my old department head from the high school. Marge, goodness, it's been ages. A few of us are getting together next Thursday. Just old-timers. We miss you. No one teaches a class on The Great Gatsby like you did. Please say you'll come. The joy was so sharp, so sudden, it was painful. A lifeline, a connection to the woman I used to be. Yes, I said, my voice too loud. Oh, Linda, yes, I'd love to. I'll be there. I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. I felt a spark of my old self. When I turned, Robert was standing in the kitchen doorway. I hadn't even heard him come in. He was in his shirt sleeves, watching me. His face was perfectly calm. Who was that? He asked, his voice casual. Just Linda, an old colleague from the school. I tried to sound casual too, but I could feel the blood draining from my face. And what did she want? Oh, just a get-together. The old teachers. Nothing important. I was already backing down, already trying to make it small. He walked toward me, slowly. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He took my chin in his hand, a gesture that once seemed tender and was now a threat. What did I tell you about those people, Margaret? They're small, they're provincial. They are not part of our life now. You said you would be there, without even asking me. Robert, it's just coffee, I protested weakly. His grip on my chin tightened, just enough to make me wince. You don't think, Margaret. That's the problem. You're not supposed to think. I do the thinking for both of us. Your life is here, with me, hosting my dinners, impressing my clients. You are not some high school teacher. He let go, his face a mask of cold disappointment. Call her back, he ordered. What? Call her back, now. He pointed to the phone. Tell her you can't go. Tell her you have a prior engagement. A charity luncheon. Something she'll understand. I stared at him, my heart hammering. Robert, I can't. Now, Margaret. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely dial. Linda answered on the second ring. And with Robert standing right there, his arms crossed, watching my every expression, I lied. I listened to my own voice, thin and fake, invent a story about a charity I'd never heard of. I apologized. I heard the disappointment in her voice. Oh, okay, Marge. Well, some other time, maybe. But we both knew there wouldn't be another time. I hung up the phone. See? Robert said, his voice warm again, as if nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead. Was that so hard? I just want what's best for us. I woke up from the memory with a gasp, my throat dry. The nurse was standing over me with another cup of pills. Time for your medication, dear. The drugged haze, I realized, was just a new, more powerful version of Robert's control. Robert himself came to visit after I had been there for a month. He arrived in a long black car, looking every inch the devoted, grieving husband. He brought me an enormous bouquet of lilies that filled the room with a sickly sweet smell, the smell of funerals. He held my hand and kissed my forehead for the benefit of Nurse Gable, who was beaming at him. You are such a good man, Mr. Henderson. She's a very lucky woman. I'd do anything for my Margaret, he said, his voice thick with emotion. As soon as the nurse bustled out, his grip on my hand tightened. The smile vanished. He leaned in, his voice a low whisper. It's a beautiful place, isn't it? He murmured, looking out the sealed window. So quiet. No one to bother you. No one to bother me. He looked back at me, his eyes traveling over my useless legs under the thin blanket. You look peaceful. The drugs seem to suit you. I just stared at him, my mind thick and slow, but the fear was sharp enough to cut through. Doctor, Miller gives me regular updates, he continued, almost conversationally. He says you're adjusting well, that you're accepting your condition. That's good. Acceptance is important. He stood up, adjusting his expensive suit. I have to get back. Big things happening in the city. But I'll be back. You know, I'll always be here to take care of you. He leaned in and kissed me, a cold, dry kiss, the kiss of a jailer. Be a good girl, Margaret. Be quiet. Accept. When he left, the fog in my head felt darker, heavier. He was right. He had won. He had me exactly where he wanted me. A living doll, tucked away in the mountains, too drugged to be a threat, too broken to ever escape. That flicker of a flame I'd felt in the hospital, it was almost out. I was drowning. Days blurred into weeks, weeks into another month. I stopped trying to fight the drugs. What was the point? I was a body in a bed. I was exactly what they told me I was, a hopeless case. They would wheel me out of my room for an hour each afternoon, to the common room. It was a large, sterile lounge with pale green walls, a few sad-looking plants, and a television that was always on, but no one was watching. Most of the other patients were much older, sitting in their wheelchairs, staring blankly, their own minds clouded by comfort. I sat by the window, staring at the same dark forest, feeling nothing. One afternoon, a woman in a wheelchair rolled up beside me. I had noticed her before. She was younger than the others, maybe in her 40s. She had an intelligent face and eyes that, unlike everyone else's, were sharp and aware. She had been watching me. I turned my head, expecting her to say something about the weather or the bad food. She leaned in, her voice low and urgent. "Don't drink the apple juice," she whispered. I was so startled I just stared at her. "What?" "The juice they bring around at 4 o'clock. Don't drink it. It's not for hydration. It's where they put the extra-strength sedative." I didn't know what to say. I must have looked as confused as I felt. "My name is Judith," she said. She gestured to her own legs, motionless in the chair. "Car accident, 2 years ago. They told me I'd never walk again, too." Her words were a jolt, like cold water. "They moved me to a new wing. I watch," she continued, her eyes scanning the room. "I've been watching you. You're new. You're one of his." "One of whose?" "Dr. Miller's. You're a special case, like me, a no-hope case, the ones they get paid well to keep hopeless." My heart, which I thought had forgotten how to beat quickly, gave a sudden, hard thump. What are you talking about?" "This place, Margaret," she said, her voice bitter. "It's not a hospital. It's a dumping ground, a polite prison, for inconvenient wives. For wealthy relatives whose families want their money. My brother controls my estate. He pays Miller a fortune to care for me here, where I can't interfere with him selling off everything I own." I looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't drugged. She was clear. She was angry. "The pills," I whispered, my mouth dry. "I spit them," she said simply. "I've been doing it for over a year. I hide them under my tongue, in my cheek. I drop them in the plants. It took me months to get clear. Months of pretending to be a good, docile vegetable. But I'm clear. But your legs, they said, she scoffed. What do they know? They don't want to know." That night, long after Nurse Gable had done her final rounds, long after the heavy quiet of the sedated clinic had fallen, my door creaked open. I tensed, my heart leaping into my throat. It was Judith. She wheeled herself in, her movements silent and practiced. She closed the door behind her with a soft click. "Okay," she whispered, rolling up to my bed. "We don't have much time." "What? How?" "The night nurse is in the break room. She'll be gone for 30 minutes. Now listen. Your husband, Robert." My blood turned to ice. "What about him?" I heard Miller on the phone with him last week, from the nurse's station. I'm good at listening. Your husband pays a bonus, a very large one, to make sure your recovery doesn't progress, to make sure you remain stable. Do you understand what stable means, Margaret? It means this. She gestured to my inert body. It means you never, ever get better. They are paid to keep you paralyzed. The words hit me harder than Robert's fist ever had. This wasn't just neglect. It wasn't just a bad diagnosis. It was a conspiracy. It was a continuation of his abuse, outsourced to men in white coats. I felt a surge of rage so hot and so powerful, it burned through the chemical fog like a fire. What do? I whispered, my voice shaking with a new, terrifying energy. First, Judith said, you wake up, you fight the drugs, starting right now. She reached into her pocket and pulled out something. It was one of my pills, one I had seen her palm during the evening medication round. They'll be in with your nighttime dose in an hour. You're going to do what I do. You're going to hide it, under your tongue. And when the nurse leaves, you spit it out. It's the first step. She looked me dead in the eye, her gaze unyielding. They told me I'd never walk again, too, she repeated. And they're wrong. With an effort that made her face grimace, she focused, and under her thin cotton blanket, I saw it. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. A twitch. A deliberate, voluntary tightening of the muscle in her thigh. My jaw dropped. It's not much, she whispered, exhausted from the effort. But it's mine. The doctors don't know about it. My brother doesn't know about it, and it's a start. She placed her hand on mine. Her hand was warm. Real. It's going to be hell, Margaret. Waking up from this fog is hard. The pain comes back, but you have to, because if you don't, he wins. They win, and you stay in this bed forever. She wheeled herself to the door. Can you do it? Can you fight? I looked at the woman who had just given me a terrible, precious gift. The truth. I thought of Robert's smug, satisfied face. I thought of his cold kiss. Yes, I said, my voice hoarse. Yes, I can fight. Good, she said. The war starts tonight. That night, Nurse Gable came in at her usual time, 10 o'clock on the dot. She was a large, heavy-footed woman who always seemed faintly annoyed. She held the small paper cup with my nighttime dose. Here you are, dear. This will help you sleep soundly. My heart was a trapped bird slamming against my ribs. I could feel Judith's imagined gaze on me, a silent command. Fight. Thank you, nurse, I whispered, my voice thick. I took the cup. She always stayed to watch. She wanted to see me put them in my mouth and take the gulp of water. This was the moment. I put the 2 pills on my tongue, one large, one small, and took the water, but I held it all in my mouth. I didn't swallow. I used my tongue to push the pills into my cheek, a trick I'd seen in movies but had never imagined doing. The taste was bitter, chalky, and it started to dissolve immediately, coating my mouth. I swallowed the water, keeping the pills firmly lodged. Nurse Gable grunted, satisfied. Good girl, sleep well. She took the cup and left, the door clicking shut behind her. The second she was gone, I spat the half-dissolved, disgusting mush into a tissue I had clutched in my hand. My body was shaking so violently I thought the bed springs would give me away. I had done it. It was a small act of defiance, but it felt as big as a mountain. I was terrified. The next morning, I did the same. And that night. And the next day. Judith had warned me, but I was not prepared for what came next. Waking up from a chemical fog is not like waking up from a nap. It is a violent, agonizing birth. On the 3rd day of spitting the pills, the world snapped into sharp, brutal focus. The colors in the room seemed too bright. The sounds, a cart rolling in the hall, a nurse's squeaking shoe, were like nails on my brain. And then came the pain. The drugs hadn't just been comfort. They had been a thick wool blanket smothering a bed of raging fire. Now, The blanket was gone. My spine, my back, my hips, every part of me that had been beaten and broken, screamed. It wasn't a dull ache. It was a constant, sharp, electrical storm of agony. There were moments in those first few days when I begged, prayed, for the fog to come back. I would clutch the hidden pills in my hand, so close to just swallowing them, to giving in to the sweet relief of oblivion. "It's your body waking up," Judith whispered to me in one of her brief, secret visits. She had wheeled herself into my room in the dead of night, her face a pale shadow. "It's a good sign. Pain means the nerves are still there. It means there's still a connection. Hold on to the pain, Margaret. It's your proof that they're lying." So I held on. I learned to ride the waves of agony, to breathe through the moments when my vision went white, and with the pain came something else, clarity. My mind, so long wrapped in cotton, was finally mine again. I could think, I could remember, I could hate, and that hate, that cold, pure rage at Robert and at Dr. Miller, became my fuel. The days were a performance. I was the star of my own tragic play. I lay in bed, my face carefully arranged into a mask of placid, doped-up acceptance. I let my eyes be dull and unfocused when the nurses were near. I was the perfect, docile patient. But the nights were my own. After a week of clearing my system, Judith started the real work. She would sneak into my room, night after night, at precisely 2:15 a.m., after Nurse Gable had done her rounds and was safely in the break room. "We start now," she said, her voice a low command. She was a brutal, merciless, and wonderful teacher. She had spent her own 2 years of hopelessness reading every anatomy and neurology book her family had been allowed to send her. "The doctors gave up," she explained, "but I didn't. I studied. I learned. They call it irreversible, but the body is a mystery, Margaret. It wants to heal. We just have to remind it how." Our therapy was a secret, agonizing ritual. It wasn't about big movements. It was about the brain. "Close your eyes," she'd command, her hand on my completely inert leg. "Now I want you to think about moving your big toe. Don't try. Just command it. See it in your mind. Send the message, over and over. Move." I would lie there in the dark, sweating, my whole body clenched with the effort of thinking. Move, toe, move, move, move. I would concentrate so hard my head would pound, my jaw aching, and nothing would happen. "Again," Judith would order, for hours, every single night. While I was trying to send a message to my toe, she was working on my body, forcing my atrophied muscles to remember. She would bend my knees, massage my calves, push against my feet, actions that were so painful I would bite down on my pillow to keep from crying out. "This is what real physical therapy is," she'd grunt, her own arms shaking with the effort of moving me. "Not that passive nonsense the orderlies do. We have to fight the atrophy. We have to keep the muscles alive, ready for when your brain finally breaks through." Weeks went by. A month. My performance for the doctors and nurses was flawless. My secret life in the dark was a frustrating hell. I saw no progress, only pain. "I can't, Judith," I sobbed one night, the tears hot and angry on my face. "It's not working. Nothing is happening. You're moving your leg, but I'm not. I'm broken. He broke me completely." Judith stopped. She wheeled her chair up to my bedside and looked at me, her eyes hard. "He broke your bones, Margaret. Don't you dare let him break your mind. That's the one thing you still own. Do you think this was easy for me? Do you know how long I lay in that bed, just like you, sending that same stupid message to my toe? A year. 1 full year of telling it to move every single night before I felt a single flicker. You've been at it for 5 weeks. Now stop your crying." Crying is a luxury we don't have. He wants you to give up. Every day they all tell you, "Give up, Are you going to do what they say? Have you ever had a moment like that? A moment where someone holds up a mirror and you are so ashamed of the reflection that you are forced to change, right then and there? Her words were like a slap, but it was a slap that woke me up. She was right. Crying was what he wanted. My weakness was his victory. I wiped my face, my hand shaking. "No," I said, my voice hoarse. "I'm not. Tell me what to do." She nodded, a rare, small smile on her face. "Good. Now, from the top. Close your eyes. Send the message." I closed my eyes. Move, toe, move, move. It was about 2 weeks later, in the dead of a cold, rainy night. I was doing the exercises, Judith pushing and pulling at my useless limbs. I was in the brain phase, sending the message, focusing on my right foot. Move, move. Please, God, just move. And then, I felt it. It wasn't a movement. It was a spark. A tiny electric tingle deep inside my calf, like a champagne bubble popping. I gasped, my eyes flying open. "Did you see that?" "See what?" Judith said, pausing. I don't know. I felt something. A pop. In my leg." Judith's eyes widened. "Where? Show me." "In my calf. Right here." I tried again. I focused, pushing all my will, all my hate for Robert, all my hope, down my spine and into my leg. Move. And it happened. My big toe. It jumped. A tiny, spastic, pathetic little twitch, but it was mine. It wasn't Judith moving it. It wasn't a reflex. I had told it to move, and it had obeyed. We both stared. Then we looked at each other. We didn't cheer. We didn't shout. We were too terrified. But Judith's eyes filled with tears, and she grabbed my hand, squeezing it so hard I almost cried out again. "That's it, Margaret," she whispered, her voice choked. "That's the key. The door is locked, but we just found the keyhole. Now the real work begins." From that night on, everything changed. Hope is a dangerous, powerful drug, and it's one they didn't have in their pharmacy. My progress was microscopic, painfully slow. After another month, I could make the toe twitch on command. A month after that, I could create a small, quivering tension in my calf muscle. It was nothing. And it was everything. We were so careful. We knew, with a primal certainty, that we had to hide this. This tiny flickering life in my legs was a secret that could get us killed, or at least buried so deep in this clinic we'd never be found. During the day, my legs were dead. At night, they were my secret garden, and I was tending to a single stubborn seedling. But the more alive I became, the harder it was to play the part of the doll. Something must have changed in my face. Maybe my eyes were too clear. Maybe my skin had too much color. Maybe, in my growing hope, I made a mistake. Nurse Gable began to watch me. I'd feel her eyes on me during medication time, lingering a second too long. She'd pull my blankets back with more force, checking for bed sores, her eyes scanning my legs. "You've been quiet," she said one day, her voice suspicious. "Even for you." "Just tired," I mumbled, letting my eyes droop. She grunted and left, but I knew. She suspected something. A few days later, Dr. Miller came to my room. He didn't come alone. He had Nurse Gable and a young, grim-looking orderly with him. This was not a social call. "Good morning, Margaret," he said, his voice dripping with that false, oily charm. "I hear from Nurse Gable that you've been resting well. I thought I'd come and see for myself." He didn't look at me. He was looking at my chart. "You know, your husband, Robert, he calls me every week. Such a devoted man. He's so concerned for your well-being. He wants to know that you are comfortable and stable." "Oh, so, let's just make sure." He nodded to Nurse Gable. She ripped the thin blanket off my legs, exposing them to the cold air. I flinched, not from the cold, but from the exposure. My secret, in the light. Dr. Miller pulled a small, rubber-tipped hammer from his coat pocket. Just a routine check of your reflexes, Margaret. Or the lack thereof. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My heart was pounding so hard it was a drum against my ribs. Don't move. Don't move. Be dead. Be dead. He tapped my left knee. Nothing. A dull, dead thud. I breathed an internal sigh of relief. He smiled again, patronizingly. As expected, the connection is completely severed, just as the file says. He moved to my right knee, the one where I had felt the pop, the one where I could, if I concentrated, make my toe move. And here, he tapped. I screamed in my head, "Don't!" My leg betrayed me. It wasn't a big kick, it was just a small jump, a weak but absolutely undeniable reflex. The room went utterly silent. Nurse Gable gasped, a tiny, sharp sound. The orderly's eyes went wide. Dr. Miller's smile vanished. His face, for just a second, was not clinical. It was cold. It was angry. He looked at me, his eyes boring into mine, and in them I saw what Robert saw, not a patient, but a problem, a complication. "Interesting," he said, his voice soft and dangerous. He tapped it again, harder. The leg jumped again. He slowly put the hammer back in his pocket, his eyes never leaving my face. I was trying to look confused, drugged, but I knew my terror was plain to see. "It seems," he said, "that you're experiencing some involuntary muscle spasms, a common and often uncomfortable side effect of such a severe trauma. It can be very distressing for the patient." He turned to Nurse Gable, his voice now sharp, all charm gone. "She's clearly in discomfort. We need to adjust her medication. Double her nighttime sedative, and I want to add a high-dose antipsychotic to her morning regimen. It will help quiet these spasms." "But doctor," I protested, my voice a weak croak. "I'm not. It doesn't hurt." He ignored me completely, already writing on my chart. "And I want her moved to the West Wing. Effective immediately. More intensive observation." He looked at me. "We can't have you being uncomfortable, can we, Margaret? Your husband pays us to ensure your comfort." He turned and swept out of the room, Gable and the orderly following him. I was left alone, the blanket still off my legs. I was shaking. They were on to me. The West Wing was a different world. It was where they put the difficult cases. The windows had bars. There was a nurse at a desk in the hall, 24/7. My new room had a roommate, a woman who moaned in her sleep all day, and I wouldn't be able to see Judith. That night, the new drugs hit me like a truck. They were strong. So strong. The world dissolved into a thick, poisonous soup. I tried to spit the pills, but the new nurse, a man this time, made me open my mouth, and he checked under my tongue. I was trapped. The fog was back, thicker than ever. I felt my hard-won clarity, my seedling of hope, being chemically extinguished. I cried, but my tears were silent, lost in the drugged haze. I was in the West Wing for 3 days. It felt like 3 years. I was losing. I was losing everything. Judith couldn't get to me. My legs felt dead again. On the 3rd night, a different nurse came in with my 10 o'clock pills. I hadn't seen him before. He was younger, not like the other staff. He looked tired. He looked kind. He handed me the cup. "Here you go, Mrs. Henderson." I took it, my hand limp, my mind thick with the day's drugs. I was ready to give in, to just swallow. What was the point? I put the pills in my mouth, and he handed me the water. As I drank, he didn't watch my mouth. He was looking at the door nervously. As I swallowed the water, holding the pills in my cheek, he leaned in, pretending to adjust my pillow. "Don't swallow," he whispered, so low I thought I'd imagined it. "Spit it in the cup when I turn." My head snapped up, my eyes suddenly clear. What? My name is David, he whispered, his back to the door. Judith sent me. She has a plan. I'm a part-time orderly. I'm not supposed to be on this wing, so we have to be fast. He turned and bustled with the water pitcher. I spit the pills into the paper cup, my heart exploding. He palmed the cup, replacing it with an empty one on my tray. Judith's been moved, too, he said, his voice a low, fast murmur. They're on to both of you, but I've been helping her. She reminds me of my sister. My sister was in a place like this. They said she was incurable, too. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. What plan? I whispered, my whole body alive with a new, terrified hope. A plan to get you both out. It's crazy, but it's the only way. He checked the hallway again. Listen to me. They're falsifying your charts. I saw them. Your injury, Judith's. They're bad, but they're not no hope. They're needs work. But Miller is being paid for no hope. I'm going to switch your meds, replace them with placebos. It will take a few days for me to get the schedule right. You have to keep playing the part. Can you do that? I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Good. Judith has a new message for you. It's bad. What? What is it? She heard Miller on the phone again. With your husband, Robert. He's not happy. He's worried about your spasms. He doesn't think this place is secure enough. He's making arrangements. Arrangements? David looked me dead in the eyes, his own full of a grim pity. He's moving you, Margaret, to a private care facility in Switzerland in 2 weeks. One that's more permanent. One with no visitors, no friends like Judith. If you go there, you're never coming out. The blood drained from my face. Switzerland. It was a death sentence, a tomb. So, the plan, David said, his voice hard. It's not if anymore. It's when. And it has to be soon, next Friday. It's the only way. It's a supply delivery night. The gates will be open. I drive a private ambulance for my other job. I can get one. Next Friday? I whispered. That's 9 days. It's all we have. I'll be back tomorrow with the placebos. You have 9 days to get as strong as you can, because on Friday, we run, or you spend the rest of your life in the dark. He left. I lay in the dark, the fog of the drugs already lifting, replaced by the ice-cold clarity of terror. 9 days. He hadn't told me I would never walk. He had told me I would fly. Now, I had to. The next 9 days were the longest and fastest 9 days of my life. They were a singular, focused agony. David was true to his word. On his very next shift, he brought my morning meds. He performed the same check as the other nurse, forcing me to open my mouth, but his fingers, as he checked under my tongue, were clumsy, not practiced. It was a signal. He hadn't found what he was looking for, so I passed. The pills he gave me were sugar, but I was not free. The clinic was still pumping me full of drugs from the other nurses. The double-dose sedatives at night were real. The new, terrifying antipsychotic given by Nurse Gable in the afternoon was real. David could only swap out 1, maybe 2 of my daily doses. This meant I lived in a terrible new cycle. I would be plunged into a thick chemical fog, only to be yanked out of it when the placebo dose was due. It was a violent whiplash. My head pounded. A constant, low-grade nausea lived in my stomach, but in the hours of clarity, I worked. There was no Judith. I was alone in this. My roommate was a thin, frail woman who never spoke, who only moaned, lost in her own world. The ever-present nurse in the hallway meant I couldn't risk leaving my bed. So I worked under the covers. In the dead of night, with the heavy sedative trying to pull me under, I would fight it. I would lie on my back, perfectly still, my eyes open in the dark, and I would command my legs. Move, tense, feel. I would focus on my right leg, the one with the flicker of life. Tighten. I would push all my energy, all my fear of Switzerland, all my rage at Robert into that muscle. I'd feel a faint, quivering response. I'd hold it for a count of 5, my whole body shaking with the strain, sweat breaking out on my forehead. Then I'd rest. Then I'd do it again and again, for hours. Then I'd work on the left leg, the dead one. Move, toe, move, nothing. I'd try again, move, nothing. It was a wall of static. But I remembered what Judith said. 1 full year. I didn't have a year. I had 9 days. So I kept sending the message, over and over, into the void, hoping a single spark would catch. David became my lifeline. He'd find a reason to be on my wing, to empty my trash or check my vitals. He'd pass me messages from Judith written on tiny folded scraps of paper. They're watching me, but I'm fighting. You fight too. Don't forget to stretch the ankles. Use your hands under the covers. Fight the atrophy. David is our only chance. Trust him. And David, in those brief whispered moments, told us of his plan. He had an old aunt, Ruby, who lived in the deepest, most remote part of the Appalachian Mountains. "It's a different world, Margaret," he'd whispered, his back to the door. "People there, they live like it's 50 years ago. No phones in half the houses, 1 road in, 1 road out. If we can get you there, Robert's men, Judith's brother, they'll never find you. They're looking for city people. They won't look for ghosts." The night before the escape, David came for his last check-in. His face was pale, his hands shaking. "It's tomorrow," he said, his voice barely audible. "Midnight. The supply truck arrives at 11:45 p.m. It's always chaos. They leave the side gate open for it. I'll have the ambulance parked on the service road just beyond the loading bay. I'll have uniforms for you both. Just be ready." "My roommate," I whispered, gesturing to the moaning woman. "I'll take care of it. I'll be working a double, which means I'll be assisting with the 9 p.m. medication. She'll get her real dose, plus a little extra. She'll sleep soundly." "And Judith?" "She's in C Wing. It's on the way to the loading bay. I have to get you first, then her." "The nurse on her wing. I've made arrangements. He owes me money. He'll look the other way for 5 minutes. But Margaret, once we go, there is no turning back. If we're caught—" He didn't need to finish. I knew what Dr. Miller would do. I knew what Robert would do. Switzerland would be a mercy. "I'll be ready," I said. The next day was a living nightmare. Every sound in the hall made me jump. Every time Nurse Gable came in, I was sure she knew. I was sure it was a trap. I choked down my real medication, my mind screaming. The hours from 9 p.m., when my roommate was put into a deep, drugged sleep, until midnight, they were the longest of my life. I lay in bed, fully dressed under my thin hospital gown, my heart beating a violent, painful rhythm against my ribs. At 12:05 a.m., my door opened. It was David. He was in his orderly uniform, but he was pushing a wheelchair, and in his other hand, he carried a pile of dark clothing. "It's time," he whispered. "We have to go. Now!" He moved with a frantic, terrified efficiency. He ripped the gown off me. "Put these on!" It was a dark blue orderly's uniform. It was huge on me, but it was warm. He then lifted me from the bed. I wasn't prepared for the pain. He grabbed me under the arms and I had to stifle a scream as my spine, my back, all the sleeping nerves woke up at once. I was a dead weight. He was strong, but I was not a small woman, and it was an awkward, terrible struggle. He half dragged, half carried me from the bed and dumped me into the wheelchair. My legs, useless and limp, tangled, and I almost fell out. I'm sorry," he muttered, his voice shaking. He threw a heavy blanket over me, covering me completely, tucking it in around my legs. "Just be still." He wheeled me into the hallway. The nurse's station was empty. "Shift change," he whispered. They're all in the break room. We have 2 minutes. The wheels of the chair seemed deafeningly loud on the linoleum floor. Squeak thump, squeak thump. We passed the empty desk, went through a set of double doors, and into a new, unfamiliar hallway. C-Wing. We rounded a corner, and there she was. Judith. She was already in a wheelchair, dressed in the same dark uniform, another blanket covering her. The orderly David had arranged was nowhere to be seen. "I was starting to think you'd forgotten me," Judith whispered, her voice trembling but trying for sarcasm. "No time," David said. He grabbed the handles of her chair. "I'm going to push you both. Margaret, you're in front of me. Judith, you're in front of her. Hold on to her chair." He lined us up, a strange, desperate train. He put my hands, under the blanket, on the back of Judith's chair. "Don't let go." And then he ran. He ran, pushing us both. The chairs clattered and banged against each other. It was terrifying. We flew down the hall, took a sharp right, and burst through a door into a dark, cold service corridor that smelled of old garbage. "Service elevator," David panted, slamming his hand on the button. The wait was an eternity. We could hear a gong, a door opening somewhere. Voices. Come on," Judith prayed under her breath. The elevator doors opened with a groan. David pushed us in, his body shaking with the effort. He hit the button for G ground floor, loading bay. The descent was silent. I looked at Judith. Her face was a pale, determined mask in the dim light. She found my hand under the blankets and squeezed. It was the last moment of peace we would have. The doors opened. We were not in the loading bay. We were in a bright, clean hallway, and Dr. Miller was standing right there talking to a police officer. My heart stopped. I mean it. It stopped. It was a trap. They knew. We were dead. David froze for a half second. His whole body went rigid. I saw him make a choice. He didn't run. He didn't panic. He pushed. He pushed us forward, right past them. "Excuse me, doctor," he said, his voice breathless but steady. "County hospital transfer, code blue, they're waiting for us." Miller turned, his face a mask of surprise. The police officer looked at us, a confused expression on his face. "Hey, I thought—" the officer started. "He's right, doctor," Judith suddenly gasped, clutching her chest, putting on a brilliant, desperate performance. The heart, I can't breathe." "Get them out of here," Miller snapped at David, his eyes flashing with annoyance at the interruption. He didn't even look at our faces. He just saw 2 lumps under blankets, 2 sick patients. He was too busy impressing the police, probably about some other matter, to see the 2 most valuable prisoners in his facility rolling right past him. David didn't need to be told twice. He pushed us through another set of doors, and suddenly we were outside. The cold 1 a.m. air hit me like a physical blow. It was raining, a cold, miserable drizzle. The loading bay was brightly lit. A huge truck was backing up, its beep, beep, beep alarm filling the air. Men in yellow raincoats were shouting. It was chaos. And parked just beyond the pool of light, half hidden by a row of dumpsters, was an ambulance. It was old, white, with no clinic markings. "There," David panted, "just a little more." He pushed us over the curb, a jolt that sent a white-hot spear of pain up my spine. I bit my lip to keep from screaming. He pushed us across the wet pavement, into the shadows. He fumbled with a key, opened the back doors of the ambulance. "Okay, this is the hard part." He lifted me first. It was not gentle. He was running on adrenaline. He grabbed me under the blanket, hauled me out of the chair like a sack of potatoes, and threw me onto one of the gurneys inside. I landed hard, my head hitting the metal rail. I didn't care. He ran back for Judith. She was trying to help, trying to lift herself, but she was as weak as I was. He hauled her in, placing her on the floor. "No gurney for you, Judith. Sorry," he grunted. Just drive, she yelled. He slammed the doors, plunging us into darkness. A second later, the engine roared to life. He wasn't using the siren, but the engine was loud, a low rumble. We were moving. We rolled past the loading bay toward the main gate. He's going to the gate, I whispered, my voice shaking. They'll stop us. They're expecting the supply truck to leave, Judith said, her voice tight. We're just leaving with it. I heard David's voice, muffled through the metal partition. He was talking to the guard. My whole body was clenched. This was it. What's this? A new voice, gruff. The guard. Emergency transfer. County, David said, his voice high-pitched with fake stress. Dr. Miller's orders. This one's critical. I've got no time. I didn't hear about no transfer. Do you want to be the one to tell Miller you let his patient die in the driveway? David shouted. Now open the damn gate. A pause. An eternity. Then a loud metallic clank. The gate was opening. The ambulance lurched forward. We were on the road. We were moving faster. I heard the tires hit the main road, the hum changing. We were out. I lay in the dark, listening to the sound of Judith weeping softly on the floor next to me. I wasn't crying. I was nothing. I was numb. We did it, she whispered. We're not safe, I said. Not yet. The journey was a blur of pain. David drove for hours, never stopping. Every pothole, every turn, sent fresh waves of agony through me. I was sliding on the gurney, and Judith was rolling on the floor. It was miserable. It was undignified. It was glorious. After 3 or 4 hours, David pulled over. The engine cut. Silence. He opened the back doors. The sun was just beginning to think about rising, painting the sky in a faint, bruised purple. We were at a gas station in the middle of nowhere. Okay, he said, his face pale and exhausted in the dim light. We're in West Virginia. We're safe for now. I need gas and... We need to change and get rid of these. He pointed to the wheelchairs, still folded by the clinic's loading bay. We had left them. Good. He helped me sit up. The world spun. I have supplies in this bag. He handed me a duffel. Inside were 2 sets of simple worn clothes. Sweats, old sneakers, and 2 heavy wooden canes. My aunt, he explained. She's old-fashioned. We're not bringing wheelchairs to her house. We're walking in. David, Judith said, her voice dry. We can't walk. You will, he said, his face grim. She's expecting you, and she doesn't believe in the word can't. We have another 6 hours to drive. Get changed. Rest. When we get there, the real work begins. The rest of the drive was quieter. We were on winding mountain roads. The landscape was beautiful, but rugged and poor. Small, tired-looking houses clung to the sides of hills. We were, as David had promised, in a different world. At last, just after noon, we turned off the main road. Then we turned off the paved road. We were on a dirt track, climbing so high I thought the old ambulance would die. We passed a handful of small wooden houses, a tiny church, and then we stopped. The house was tiny, made of wood that had seen 100 winters. A thin curl of smoke rose from a stone chimney. An old woman was standing on the porch. She was small, her face a map of wrinkles, and she held a shotgun, pointed not at us, but at the ground. She was just holding it. Aunt Ruby, David said, getting out of the ambulance. You're late, the woman said, her voice like gravel. And you brought a loud car. Sorry, Auntie, we had to. She looked past him, at the ambulance. Well, are they getting out, or are you going to let 'em spoil? David came to the back doors. This is it, ladies. Welcome to your new home, and your new life. He opened the doors. The sunlight was bright. He helped Judith first, half lifting her out. He handed her one of the canes. Try, he said. Judith, her face tight with pain and determination, used the ambulance door and David's arm to pull herself to a standing position. Her legs were shaking, buckling, but she was up. Then it was my turn. He helped me slide off the gurney. The moment my feet, in their old borrowed sneakers, touched the dirt, my legs collapsed. The pain was blinding. I can't, I gasped, the words ripped out of me. I can't, David, I can't. The old woman, Ruby, walked up to the back of the ambulance. She looked at me, a heap on the dirty floor, and then she looked at David. Don't baby her, she said, her voice not unkind, just final. She's not broken. She's just been told she is. She looked back at me. Her eyes were sharp and clear. The doctor in the hospital told you you'd never walk again, didn't he? She said. It wasn't a question. I just stared at her, stunned. How could she know? Well, she said, he was a liar. She held out a strong, calloused hand to me. My name is Ruby. You're in my house now. And in my house, we don't listen to liars. Now get up. Lunch is getting cold. My new life began in a small wooden house that smelled of wood smoke, dried herbs, and 100 years of history. Ruby's home was simple. There was electricity, but it was fickle, flickering and dying with every thunderstorm. There was no telephone. The water came from a well and was heated on the wood stove. It was a world away from the gleaming, sterile prison of the clinic, and even further from the cold, glass and steel luxury of my Chicago apartment. It was, in a word, perfect. Ruby, as it turned to be, was a legend in those hills. She was the local healer, the midwife, the woman people came to when doctors had failed or when they couldn't afford one. She looked at me and Judith, at our weak, atrophied legs and our city-soft hands, and she just set to work. She didn't believe in hopeless. She called it a word for lazy folks. The body wants to heal, she told me one morning, as she wrapped my legs in a hot, pungent-smelling poultice of herbs. That's its nature. The problem is the mind. The mind gets told a lie, and it repeats that lie to the body. You've been told a lie, Margaret. You've been told you're broken. We're going to tell it the truth. Our rehabilitation was nothing like the clinic. It was constant, agonizing, and rooted in the earth. It started at dawn. Ruby would have us sit on the porch in the cold morning air and just breathe. Feel the air, she'd say. It's alive. You are too. Then the work began. Judith, with her incredible self-taught knowledge of physiotherapy, would guide us. We have to rebuild, Margaret, from nothing. David, on his weekends off from his other job, he had quit the clinic the day after we escaped, claiming a family emergency, built us a set of parallel bars in the backyard, made from 2 thick branches of hickory. My first day at those bars was a humiliation. It took David and Judith both to haul me to my feet. The moment I tried to put weight on my legs, they collapsed. Not a weakness, but a complete, liquid failure. The pain was a white-hot scream, shooting from my toes all the way to the base of my skull. I hung on the bars, sobbing, my body a dead weight. I can't, I screamed, the word torn from my throat. It's too much. He did break me. It's broken. Ruby, who had been watching from the porch steps, walked over. She didn't coddle me. She didn't offer pity. She just looked at me with those ancient, knowing eyes. They told you to give up, didn't they? She said, her voice calm. That doctor, your husband, the nurses, every day they looked at you and they said, give up. Am I right? I nodded, my tears dripping onto the dirt. Well, she said, are you going to prove 'em right? That was it. That was all she said. She turned and walked back to the porch. I looked at Judith, who was clinging to the other bar, her own face pale with strain, legs shaking violently. She was holding herself up, just barely, but she was doing it. I took a breath, and then another. I let go of the anger. I let go of the despair, and I held on to the rage. "No," I whispered, "I am not." I gripped the wooden bar, my knuckles white. "Help me up," I said to David. He helped me to my feet. I held my own weight. It was only for 3 seconds, 3 seconds of the purest, most excruciating agony I have ever known. But they were my 3 seconds. That was the turning point. From then on, my life was a cycle of pain and progress, measured in inches and seconds. I'd stand for 5 seconds, then 10. Then a minute, my entire body convulsing. Then I learned to take a step, a shuffling, dragging motion, my arms doing all the work. Judith was my partner in this. We were a team. When I would fall back into despair, she would bully me. When she was too exhausted to continue, I would read to her, reminding her of the intelligent, powerful woman she was. David was our lifeline to the outside world. He'd bring supplies from the nearest town, an hour's drive away. He also brought news. "Robert is looking for you," he told me one evening, his face grim. We were sitting on the porch, the sun setting, painting the valley in shades of orange and purple. My blood ran cold. He found me?" "No," David said quickly. "That's the thing. He's looking in the wrong places. He filed a missing persons report, of course, for appearances. He has private investigators, but they're checking airports, train stations in New York, Miami. He thinks you somehow took money and ran off to live a new life. He can't imagine this." David gestured to the simple cabin, the mountains, the quiet. "He thinks you're in a city. He's not looking for a woman learning to stand in the backwoods of Appalachia." The news gave me a cold comfort. He was still out there, but he was far away. The fear gave my rehab a new urgency. I had to get strong, not just to walk, but to fight if he ever did find me. Months passed. The autumn leaves turned to fire and fell. The first snows came. It was a hard, cold winter. But inside that cabin, I was being reforged. Ruby taught me about the herbs, but she also taught me about myself. She'd have me sit and shell beans with her, or knead bread. Simple physical tasks that forced me to use my hands, to connect with my body in a way that wasn't about pain, but about creation. It was during this time that I met Mary. She was a local girl, maybe 10 years old, who lived in one of the other small houses down the track. She was brought to Ruby by her grandmother. Mary had been in a terrible accident. A pot of boiling water had overturned on her. Her face and arm were covered in thick, angry scars. She never spoke. She just hid behind her long hair and behind her grandmother's skirt. The local school had said she was too distracting for the other children. Ruby, in her infinite wisdom, looked at me. "You used to be a teacher," she said. "This child needs one." The body heals, but the spirit needs tending too, hers and yours. So I started to teach Mary. At first, it was just me reading to her on the porch. She would sit on the bottom step, as far from me as possible. I didn't push her. I just read. I read poetry. I read Huckleberry Finn. I read stories of brave women and faraway places. One day, I was doing my own homework, my agonizing, slow walk between the parallel bars. I was sweating, grunting, my face twisted in a grimace. I finished my laps and collapsed into my chair, exhausted. I looked up, and Mary was watching me, her eyes wide. She wasn't hiding. "Does it hurt?" she whispered. It was the first time I'd heard her voice. "Yes," I gasped, wiping my brow. "Every time." "Then, why do you do it?" I looked at this small girl, hiding her own wounds, and I told her the truth. "Because some people told me I'd be stuck in a chair forever," I said. "They told me I was done. And I decided I didn't like them writing my story, so I'm writing my own. It hurts to hold the pen is all." She was quiet for a long time. Then she came up onto the porch, sat beside my chair, and pulled the hair back from her face. "Okay," she said. "Can you teach me math now?" In teaching Mary, I found a part of myself I thought was dead. The teacher, the nurturer, the woman I was before Robert. As I watched her spirit heal, as she started to laugh and argue and demand more difficult books, I felt my own spirit mending. Spring came, the snow melted, and with the new life outside came a new life for me. One day I was standing at the parallel bars. Judith was on the porch, reading. Ruby was in her herb garden. I took a deep breath, and I let go, with one hand. I was standing, on my own, shaking, but standing. "Judith," I whispered. She looked up. Her book fell from her lap. "Margaret!" I took my other hand off the bar. I stood, unsupported, for 5 seconds. 10. My legs were screaming, on fire, buckling. But they held. I collapsed, catching myself on the bars, but I was laughing. We were all laughing. A month later, I was walking with 2 canes. A month after that, with 1. And then David came. He arrived on a Saturday, but it wasn't his usual visit. He looked stunned. He sat at Ruby's kitchen table for a long time, just holding a newspaper. "David?" I asked, my heart hammering. "What is it? Is it Robert?" "It's Robert," he said, his voice flat. He pushed the newspaper, a Chicago paper, across the table. The headline was huge. "Chicago business magnate arrested." It wasn't for me. It wasn't for what he did to me. It was for everything else. The logistics business. It was a front for racketeering, for smuggling, for fraud, for years of organized crime. Someone, one of his partners, had turned on him. The FBI and the IRS had torn his empire apart. He was in federal prison. All his assets were frozen. The article said he would be there for decades. I stared at the paper. I read the words. Racketeering, fraud, conspiracy. I was free. I had been so focused on the physical escape, on the physical recovery, I hadn't realized I was still, in my mind, waiting for him. Still looking over my shoulder. Now, he was gone. He was the one in a cell. I expected to feel joy, elation. Instead, I felt nothing, a vast, echoing emptiness. The monster that had defined my life, the focal point of my fear and my rage, was gone. I walked out to the porch, using my cane, and I sat. I looked at the mountains that had been my refuge, and for the first time since that day in the hospital, I cried. I cried for the woman I had been, the teacher with all her dreams. I cried for the years he had stolen. And I cried because I had survived, and I had no idea what to do next. Judith sat with me. We talked that night for hours. "I can't go back," she said. "My brother, he may not be a criminal like Robert, but he's a thief. He stole my life. I don't want it back, not that life." "I don't either," I said. "Chicago, it's a graveyard." We had money. Judith, with David's help, had managed to get a lawyer and reclaim her estate from her brother, who had backed down the second his hopeless sister showed up able to walk and sign legal papers. And I, as the wronged wife, was actually entitled to what was left of my and Robert's assets after the government was done. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. We had our freedom. We had our health, new and scarred as it was. And we had a purpose. We just didn't know it yet. The answer came, as it so often did, from Mary. She was graduating from her little grammar school. She was going to have to take the bus an hour each way to the county high school. "I wish you could just start a school here, Margaret," she said, as we finished our last lesson. "You're a better teacher than all of them." A school. The idea hit me. Not a school for children. A different kind of school. A refuge. A place like Ruby's, but more. A place for women like me. women like Judith. Women who had been told they were broken. Women who had been told to give up. I looked at Judith. She was already smiling. She had seen the same spark. A place, Judith said, her voice quiet, for women who need to heal, not just their bodies, but their spirits. A place, I added, where we can tell them the truth, that the body wants to heal, that they are not broken. We left Appalachia 2 months later. Saying goodbye to Ruby and David was one of the hardest things I've ever done. They had saved my life. Ruby just nodded. "Go on," she said, pulling me into a rough embrace. "Your work ain't here, it's out there. Go be the light." We chose Asheville. It was a city, but it was a mountain city. It felt like a good halfway point between the world we had left and the world we had found. We used our money to buy a large, beautiful, and completely run-down Victorian house on the edge of town. It had a huge garden, big rooms, and good bones. It was perfect. We spent a year rebuilding it. We made it accessible. Ramps, wide doorways, a lift. We hired a small staff, and we needed a name. "What do we call it?" Judith asked one night as we sat on the newly finished porch looking at the plans. I thought back to that day in the hospital, the cold, sterile room, the doctor's flat voice. "You will never walk again." I thought of Robert's whisper, "Now you are mine, forever." "He told me I would never walk," I said to Judith. And in that moment, I swore that if I couldn't walk, I would find a way to fly. Judith smiled. "That's it then. House of Wings." It sounded perfect, a safe place, a place to learn to fly. The House of Wings opened. At first it was slow. We worked with local shelters, women's centers. Our first few residents were women running from abuse, women who just needed a safe place to land. And then, one winter afternoon, about a year after we opened, a social worker called. "I have a case, Margaret," she said. I don't know what to do. Her name is Sharon. Her husband, he did a real number on her. She's at the hospital, but her physical injuries, they've broken her spine. The doctors just told her she'll never walk again, and her husband is trying to get her transferred to a private facility. Her story, it sounds just like yours. I went to the hospital that day. I walked in, using my single wooden cane. I found her room. She was young. So young. Her face was a landscape of bruises, but it was her eyes that I recognized. They were empty, hollowed out, the look of someone who had given up. I sat by her bed. I introduced myself. She didn't respond. "Sharon," I said gently, "I know you're in pain. I know what they told you." She finally turned her head. A single hot tear rolled down her temple. The doctor," she whispered, her voice cracked. "He said, I'll never walk again." I felt the old, cold memory wash over me. I looked at this woman, this mirror of my past. "The doctor who told me that," I said, my voice steady, had cold, clinical eyes. He said it like he was commenting on the weather. "You will never walk again." Her eyes snapped to mine, a flicker of something. Confusion. "But you're—" She gestured to my cane. "You're walking." I stood up. I walked from her bedside to the window and back. I felt the familiar ache in my back, the stiffness in my right leg. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't a dance, but it was walking. "Yes," I said. "He was wrong." I took her hand. "My name is Margaret, and I run a house, a place called the House of Wings. It's a place for women who have been told they'll never walk again. It's where we learn to fly." "How?" she whispered, the first spark of hope I had seen. How can you, after all this?" "Because," I said, "I know the truth." I know that every day the world will tell you to give up. Your own mind will tell you. The doctors will tell you. The people who hurt you prey on you giving up. I leaned in and I told her the motto of our house, the words I had learned in a cabin in Appalachia. The words I had learned from a little girl with scars, the words that had become my own. Every day they will tell you, give up, and you must look them in the eye and you must say, never. Sharon came to live with us. Her recovery was long, it was brutal, and it was beautiful, and I found my life. My purpose was not in surviving Robert. It was in creating a place where women could survive their own monsters. The doctor in Chicago was right in a way. I never did walk again. Not like that young, naive teacher. That woman was gone. But in helping others, in building a life from the ashes, in proving them all wrong, I did so much more than walk. I flew. Thank you for listening to me today, for allowing me to share with you this intimate chapter of my life. If my story has touched you, please don't hesitate to leave a like on this video and subscribe to this channel to discover other testimonies like mine. And please share it, because who knows? Maybe someone going through a similar trial right now will find the courage to keep searching, to hope, to believe in the impossible. Tell me in the comments, where are you listening from today? Thank you from the bottom of my heart for listening to me.